Man, I get asked a lot of questions on Facebook and YouTube and every kind of imaginable way. I get dozens of questions a week about bear hunting, and the number one question, you probably know what it is. I've got this big bear on my bait, but I can't get him to come in during the daylight. We've all had this happen to us. The best bear baiters, the best bear hunters have this happen to them. It's a fact of life. If you go on any bear hunting forum or on Facebook and you ask people how to get bears to come in during the daylight, you're going to get some ridiculous suggestions like, take the bait out with you. So if the bear doesn't find bait there, why is he going to come back? Taking the bait out with you doesn't make any sense. Or maybe, spook the bear at night by using a radio or motion sensing lights or something like that, and if you spook him at night, then he'll only come in during the daylight. Another one is to cut back on bait, and hopefully the bears will figure out that they're got to get there earlier in order to get fed, which is completely counterproductive as well, because if the bear comes to your bait and doesn't have a good experience and he doesn't find something good to eat, why is he going to come back? So forget all of those things, and I'm going to tell you several reasons why your bears might have gone nocturnal in the first place, and then also what you can do about it. If you subscribe to this channel, a vegan dies a little bit inside every time there's a new subscriber. So often people are surprised by my answer about why you have nocturnal bears on your bait, because most of the time I'm convinced it is your location. There's something about your location that the bears don't feel comfortable with. Another part of this might be the consistency, or as I mentioned, running out of bait can be the worst thing you can do. If the bears come there and they don't find something good to eat, they always have other options. Always keep that in mind. You don't want to do anything that would cause them to go somewhere else and find another food source or find another bait or something like that. Keep in mind that these bears, most of your nocturnal bears are the big males. They're 8 to 12, maybe 15 years old. They've played the game. They know what's going on. They're super cautious. They just know when they're approaching a bait, they're going to stalk the bait. They're going to use a great deal of caution, and they're just like, this is too good to be true. And they just know it. So they're going to approach the bait with a great deal of caution, and any little thing that could make them uncomfortable or feel unsafe, they're just not going to come to the bait in the daylight. The dark makes them feel safe. That can have a lot to do with location, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the other thing that's really important is the consistency with which you're baiting. One of the worst things that you can do is spook a bear off the bait. I've hunted all over Canada. I've hunted these remote Canadian bears where they have very little contact with humans and they don't have the same fears that they do in the places that I hunt and probably where you hunt. And you can spook a bear off the bait and you get up in the stand and 15 or 30 minutes the bear's back. Well, that just doesn't happen in these areas like Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and parts of the West, Oklahoma, Missouri, and the East Coast, Maine. I could name all of these states where people are probably watching this from that are having trouble with nocturnal bears. If you spook a mature male off the bait in these highly competitive areas where they have a lot of contact with humans, it's very possible that this bear is not going to come back in the daylight for the rest of the season. So this might not have been something that you did that caused the bear to go nocturnal. It could possibly be that he just learned this from someone else. Somebody else spooked him or did something inconsistent in their baiting, got down from a tree stand when the bear was at the bait, or any of these things that could happen that just educates these big bears. They might be educated by someone else, so you might not have made the mistake. And some of these bears, frankly, just become unkillable by legal means, by baiting. Maybe the dog hunters will get them, but your chances of getting some of these bears are really slim. So if you only have one big nocturnal bear on your bait, you might ask yourself, why am I feeding this bear? And you might be better off to spend your resources elsewhere. The other side of that is that If your location is really good and the bears should be able to feel comfortable coming there and they're getting fed every time they come, you can minimize spooking the bears off your bait by going to your bait at the times of the day when they're least likely to be there. Now, bears are crepuscular animals, and that's a scientific term that means they do most of their feeding in the first hour of daylight and the last hour of daylight. That's their natural tendency. So if they're not doing that, then something has disrupted that pattern. So if you bait in the middle of the day, say between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., you're least likely to spook the bears off the bait. And that's difficult for people that have a full-time job. I understand that. You have to do what you have to do. But the other thing is you can just put as much bait out as possible to minimize the number of times that you have to bait. In some states, you're limited on how much bait you can put out. But in most states, you can just load them down and put hundreds of pounds of bait out there, so you just don't have to go back as often. You minimize your chance of spooking the bears. In some states, you can use a barrel, which helps protect the bait from rain and bad weather. It will keep your bait fresh longer. So take advantage of that if you have that available to you. Be as consistent as possible. Use the same types of baits. Use the same types of sprays. Come at roughly the same time each day. Don't drive a four-wheeler right up to your bait. Don't take a whole bunch of other people in there. Try to be somewhat stealthy about baiting. The bears will connect the human scent at the bait package with the bait, and so they understand that the human scent and the food is connected in some way. They don't really necessarily figure out that you're feeding them, so to speak, but they do understand that there's a process taking place, and the more consistent you can be, the better off you're going to be, because consistency creates comfort in the bears. They know what to expect, and they have a positive experience each time they come to the bait. They can start to let their guard down. So these are the things that you can do to keep them from going nocturnal in the first place. But the location of the bait is so critical. I would say that there's three factors in the location of the bait. And of course, I've got videos on this channel about choosing a good location. Go back and watch those. But in a nutshell, there's three things to do with the location. First of all, you want to feed the bears to the point where they can just fill up their bellies and they won't go far, and they're going to lay up nearby. And they're going to want water. They're eating 25,000 calories or more a day. It takes a lot of water to help them digest all those calories. So they got to drink water. They're also going to be laying in the water. Swamps, creeks, rivers, boggy areas, ponds. Those are the types of things that the bears look for to spend their day. Remember, they got a heavy layer of fat and heavy fur and a black coat. They're going to be laying either in water or near water or in cool, damp areas. Some of the best bear beds that I've found when I've walked into bear bedding areas are places where they're mossy and a bear can just lay down, and when his weight pushes down, water seeps up, and they seem to really like that. So that's really an important part of choosing your location. You got to be close enough so that when they get up from where they're laying during the day and they're hungry and they're going to get to the bait before dark. I've been asked many times, is there an ideal distance from water? And I don't know that there is, and I'm not sure what it would be, but I can tell you that I would try to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 yards, or maybe a little bit less, from water, so you don't spook the bears when you're baiting, but they're close enough that they can get there before dark. A little rabbit trail I'm going to go on here, because this is a question that gets asked a lot too, should you try to bang the buckets and try to tell the bears that you're there? I would say generally these bears that come in right after you bang the buckets are almost always small bears. You rarely have that happen with a big mature bear. It just almost never happens. They wait until that last hour. Sometimes you'll see these big bears right at daylight in the morning too. At some point I'll do a video about that and whether or not you should hunt in the mornings. But that's an entirely different topic altogether. So the water's important, but also important is the fact that the bears are stalking the bait with a very cautious attitude. It's not like they're just out walking around in a hayfield during the day. When they're approaching a bait, they have a really super cautious attitude. Their senses are at a fine tuning, and they're walking through areas where they feel comfortable. And they don't like to walk across open areas. They don't like canopied areas where there's not much ground cover. They don't like to walk across a field. Typically, when they are going to a bait, they want to be in a situation where they feel concealed. So make sure your bait is in an area that gives them a corridor of thick cover that they can follow to get to the bait. That's very important. So are these nocturnal bears just plain unkillable? And the answer to that is some of them are, because they're just not going to slip up. But the other side of that is that if your location is really good and you've given them everything that they want, they got plenty to eat, they got good bedding cover, they got water, and they got approach cover, and they come and have a good experience. Every time they come and they feel comfortable and they feel safe, they can let their guard down a little bit. And this doesn't always happen, but I've seen it often enough that it's worth mentioning. If they're not spooked and if they just have an experience that causes them to feel safe, when they get something to eat, they'll come in a little earlier and a little earlier. And I've seen this happen quite a few times where a bear, he's coming in at 10 o'clock at night, and then he's coming in at 9, and then he's coming in at 8:30, and pretty soon he's showing up in that last few minutes of legal shooting light, and you're going to have the chance to shoot him. So hope is not lost. Some of these nocturnal bears are killable if you do everything right and follow all the rules. I hope this helps you. I know it's a ton of information coming at you awful fast, but these are the principles of increasing your chance to kill that nocturnal bear. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.